Welcome, everyone. How's everybody doing this fine Sunday evening? I am Kwami Abdul-Bey, co-convenor of the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement. I want to thank everyone for committing to spend the next 90 minutes with us as the Arkansas Peace and Justice Memorial Movement, APJMM, teams up with the formidable Little Rock Central High School historic site with Superintendent Robin Wyatt to bring you guys actually a program that we were planning on doing in person before the SARS-CoV-2 global pandemic hit. And we were going to do it at the Visitor Center over across the street from Little Rock Central High School. However, now that we're in the situation that we're in now and everything's virtual, we've decided to do this virtual. One of the things that we're missing in this virtual aspect is the actual screening of the film, which we had planned to do. And we learned that translating film screenings of major motion pictures from in-person to virtual is not as easy as we thought it would be. So we hope that everyone had an opportunity to watch Harriet, the motion picture, on their own. I sent out a message for everybody to watch it on HBO Max, get you a 7-day free trial subscription so that you can watch it for free, so that we can have this discussion, because this discussion is part of our series that we call Descendants Talk Mini Festival, where what we're doing is we're going and we're finding descendants of major historical figures to have discussions about their ancestor and what they did in the past, and also translate that into what's going on in the world today. Today is a very interesting day. It is the International Day for the remembrance of the slave trade and its abolition. This is a day that is has been celebrated by the United Nations for the last decade. And what's significant about this day is that on this day in 1791, a revolution started. And that revolution ended with the freedom of the nation that we now know as Haiti. So that's why this day was chosen by the United Nations as a day where we all remember what slavery was and what we need to do to continue to eradicate it. With that, I want to introduce to you my co-moderator. That is Superintendent Robin Wyatt of the National Park Services Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site.
Welcome, everybody. I appreciate your taking the time to spend this evening with us and just to have dialogue. I am the superintendent at Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site, but I'm also interested in all of us just talking about this civil rights icon, this woman that we all learned about when we were in school. From grade school on up to today, her name is still mentioned. Why is that? And why is this important? And how does this actually connect to what is going on today? There's a vein going on here, and I want us to be able to talk about this vein that's happening. There's a movement going on today, but there was a movement started a long time ago also with Harriet Tubman. She started a movement as well. And so today we're going to actually talk about that movement, that this abolitionist, this emancipator, liberator, and civil rights icon. We're going to talk about her today and connect all of that to what's happening in 2020. All right. Back to you.
Indeed. And our panelists for today I want to first introduce the woman that we all know as Tina. Earnestine Wyatt is the great, 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 three greats, right?
Yes.
The great, great, great grandniece of Harriet Tubman. And I want to really thank you for being here and to represent a pretty awesome lineage that you have. Will you go ahead and take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and say a few things?
Yes, well, thank you, Kwami and Robin, for inviting me. Like you said, my name is Earnestine, and most of the time I go by Tina. That's what I like that better. Martin Wyatt, and I am the great, great, great grandniece of Harriet Ross Tubman. I am related through her sibling, Soph Ross, who was sold off and left her infant child behind. And most of my family lived in Auburn. My mother lived there, and my grandmother, my great grandmother, and so on and so forth. And have family that's still there. So I spent a lot of time in Auburn growing up, and I have a lot of good memories about it. And but now, just like Robin said, there are things that we can show the relevancy of to what and connect to what Aunt Harriet did and who she was and how that impacts what we do today and what's going on right now and why we need her, you know, and learn lessons from what she did.
Indeed, indeed. Also, we have joining us today is Dr. Kate Larson. She is one of the premier historians that have spent a lot of time and energy researching the life of Harriet Tubman, writing books, and also being the consultant on the film Harriet, the motion picture Harriet. Kate, can you go ahead and take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what brought you here to this point?
I started researching Harriet Tubman's life, 25 years ago. And she just captured me, captured my heart, my imagination, my intellect. I just needed to know more about her. So I started, I went into a Ph.D. program to get my doctorate in American history, and I researched my dissertation on her life. And since I finished that dissertation and published my biography, Bound for the Promised Land, about Tubman in 2003, it's amazing it's been that long, I continue to research her life every single day. And we now have 2 national parks in her honor, one in Maryland, where she was born and raised and where she conducted her rescue missions, and a park in Auburn, New York, where she spent the last 50 years of her life. And her life really is remarkable, and she was a remarkable human being. And I've watched the world change and take note of her in the 21st century. And I think she is someone that can inspire everybody, because she was a very ordinary person who did extraordinary things. And her values are values that we all hold. And she fought for freedom. Her family meant everything to her. Her faith, which also was at her core, and community. And these were the 4 values, the 4 things that drove her every single day. And I think that's why she's so appealing to people, because they can identify with that. And I'm looking forward to this discussion, because I think the movie is great, and we can talk about that and the truth versus the myths in the film. But it's a great moment in time to be celebrating Harriet Tubman.
Well, since you brought that up, let's go ahead and jump into that. There's a lot of controversy that surrounded the release of the movie. A lot of people talk about what is and what isn't, what was and what wasn't. Me personally, I I really appreciated the fact that Harriet's life was able to be put on the big screen for audiences that would not normally have been exposed to her. In the society that we live in today, not everybody reads books, not everybody listens in school, but everybody goes to the movies. So what is real and what isn't real about the movie? What I guess we'd say, what are some of the key points we want to take away when we watch the movie?
Okay, can I say something before we go into that?
Yes.
I was fortunate to meet Kate Larson a while back. We were both
Hey,
involved.
Robin, bring your camera down a little bit. I'm seeing it. Yeah, there you go. I was
There we
looking at
go.
your forehead.
I was fortunate enough to be involved with the Harriet Tubman Research Study Project over 20 years ago, and Kate Larson was involved in as well, and several other people. And this was part of the National Park Service Research Study Project. Within that, I just did a 3-month detail because I was living in Grand Canyon at that time. And I did a 3-month detail in Boston on this project. But I was fortunate enough to travel to places and walk the same paths that Harriet Tubman walked. I went to, I think it was Dover, Delaware. I also went to Katrin, Canada, which you got. went to Buffalo, New York. And I was fortunate enough to get involved at that level, whereas it really became personal, whereas this woman was, you know, to me, she became my first lady because she was an ordinary person and she did some extraordinary things that we could never fathom. Going back and saving people, walking those trails, walking those walks, it was a wonderful experience for me. But I would like, Kate, for you to go into some detail with that, with the research study project and some of your research in discovering who this awesome woman was and who she is.
Thank you, Robin. So I'll do it briefly because I know people want to talk about the film too, but I will say this. When I started my research and then I started working with the National Park Service because they wanted to create a park for Tubman, it turns out, everybody thought, oh, you know, you can't know about Harriet Tubman because she didn't read or write formally, you know, letters. So how could we know about her life? Well, it turns out there's a lot of research, there are a lot of documents out there because she knew so many people who wrote about her, who fell in love with her. All those abolitionists in the North, they wrote about her in their letters, they quoted her, they talked amongst themselves about how incredible she was, and they just were stunned by her courage and her fortitude and her huge heart. And she made them feel they needed to be better. They were abolitionists. They thought they were doing the good thing already, but she called on them to work harder and to do more, and they did more because of her. And so there's so much information out there. So don't believe people that say to you, oh, you can't research the lives of African Americans before the Civil War because there are no documents. That isn't true. Now, there is more out there about Harriet Tubman because she met so many famous people, but when she was an enslaved person, there were documents in Maryland that talk about her because she was unfortunately legally property, and property is recorded. And so for everybody out there, don't listen to anyone who tells you you cannot trace your family history. You can. And so the material is out there, and a lot of archives in the South are opening up and letting those documents out so you can all see them. So in my process of researching, I just followed one document to the next document to the next document, and everything I wrote about was based on a primary source. It has to be that way. And I can't stop researching her life because new things come out every day about her. And she is a remarkable, remarkable American. And I encourage everybody to research a person that they find passion in, or to research Harriet Tubman's life, but you can do it. It's not impossible. You can do it. And I'm so glad the National Park Service believed all of us, Robin, and they created 2 parks, not just one,
Yes.
but 2 parks in her honor, which is incredible. It isn't, they haven't done that in the system before. So, you know, kudos to Harriet Tubman. That's how awesome she is.
And why did they find the need to create 2 parks for Harriet?
Because she was born enslaved in Maryland, and we need to know and understand that story, to understand who she was and where she came from and how it was possible that she did the amazing things that she did. And then she spent the last 50 of her 91 years in Auburn, New York, where she continued pushing for civil rights and women's rights and health care for the poor, and providing food and shelter for people. She never stopped doing the things she needed to do to make the world a better place. So the National Park Service recognized that we can't tell the story of Harriet Tubman in one place. It had to be at least 2 places, Maryland and Auburn, New York.
Well, you have a 3rd place too, but it's not in United States, and that's St. Catharines,
Yeah.
Ontario. Yeah.
One of these days we'll get it in there.
Yeah.
Well, you know something, and Robin, I am so glad that you just talked about the journey that you took. Back in, I guess it was like 1994, 95, I had recently left from teaching at Clark Atlanta University, and I had an elder couple with whom I was friends asked me what I was doing for the next couple of days, and I said nothing. And they said, "Why don't you go on a bus trip with us?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So we departed from Hampton, Virginia, and we took the journey where we actually traced all of Harriet Tubman's footsteps from Maryland in the several different routes going to Canada, and we stopped at every single important stop on the way there, all the way up to several different important stops in Canada. And that's what opened my eyes to the awesomeness of Harriet Tubman. So I was like, she did all this?
And more.
No.
I like, okay, Tina, Harriet Tubman is the name that we know her as, but this is her secondary name. Can you introduce us to your great-great-great-grand aunt and her original name, and who she was, and your family lineage, her siblings and everything?
Well, her given name was Araminta, and they called her Minty for short. And when she got married, she decided that she would change her name to her mother's name, which was Harriet. So, because they called her mother Rit. So she changed her name then and began calling herself Harriet. Now, you know, like Robin was talking about taking a trip into Buffalo. That's where I'm originally from. I'm from Buffalo, New York. And but my mother, and because it's her maternal line, came from Auburn, New York. And so that's where Aunt Harriet had taken all of her siblings. There's what, 9 of them. And the ones that were still there and able to, you know, for her to take them, she was able to do that and take them up to Auburn and change their names to Stewart. So, you know, that's what our names became, was Stewart, then Ross Stewart. And she did that to, you know, so that they can go undetected, you know, in terms of where they were taken and where they were. But as far as, like I said, if you watch the movie, there were 2 women in the beginning that were in the carts. You know, it was kind of like grayed out, you know, a little bit. but there were two women on the cart being taken away. And one of them was my great-great-great-grandmother, Soph, which was Aunt Harriet's older sibling. And then the other one was Lina. And I think Lina was the oldest, right, Kate?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, Lina was the oldest. And so, and then she had other siblings. There was Ben, Robert, trying to remember them all. Rachel, Moses. Let's see, how many is that?
Henry and Mariah Riddy.
Yeah. Okay, so, had all of those. I don't think that Moses, they could ever find out what happened with him. So, and Rachel died in Maryland, and Lina and Soph were sold away. So mostly it was her brothers that were taken up north, and nieces and nephews or nieces that were also taken. So.
One of the things that even talks more about her being an ordinary person and speaks to it is the story about her, and anybody can help me out with this because I'm bringing it to you guys to talk about it, but the story of her going into the store she was sent into the store to help capture another enslaved person, and end up having something was thrown and it hit her, and it created a disability that she had to deal with for the rest of her life. So her being ordinary is even more ordinary, being the fact that she did have this disability. Can you talk about that?
You want me to go first, Kate, or you want to go first?
Oh, we're just talking, so
Okay.
Everybody talk.
Well, I'll talk about another aspect of it,
Okay.
of having this weight thrown into her skull. And I'll speak because I'm a registered nurse, so I speak from the knowing about the body. And by all means, she really should have been dead, because when you have the skull, which is the covering, the cranium, the covering of the brain, and you have 3 layers, there's no space up there. There's only, like, I would think, an inch or maybe a half an inch, probably, between the brain and the covering, the shell, the outer core, the outer skull of the brain. So when she was hit, what they said happened was this 2-pound weight object went into her, embedded into her skull, fractured it really, and the only thing that softened it was a scarf or a shawl that she had on her head. But that as well was embedded into her skull. So by all means, I mean, she should have died, really. But the thing is, the reason why she did not believe is because, for the grace of God, she had a purpose.
Yes.
God had a purpose for her and on her life. And she was brave enough to accept that call.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to follow up on that. I think in the movie, they do a really good job portraying the seizures that Tubman experienced for the rest of her life as a result of that head injury. And she was a deeply spiritual person. So she would have these seizures, and they were not always frightening to her. Sometimes she heard voices or people singing. She felt that God was speaking to her, and it comforted her. It gave her information, and she just followed the voices that she heard. And so in the movie, when she collapses and she goes into that dreamlike state, it's very similar to what people described, that she told them that that's what happened to her. And they portrayed what she may have been hearing, like instructions: don't go that way, turn, go the other way. Tubman said that's what happened to her. So I think that's one of the things the film really did very well, and very respectfully.
Yeah. I mean, I thought they were right on spot with, depicting her faith, and it showed you more than that. It showed her how you can practically apply the word of God in your life. And I thought that was the greatest part of the movie for me, and how they did that. I loved it. But, what resulted from that hit in the head, they were called seizures, epileptic seizures, or I would say that they were more Absonian seizures, because she would just fall asleep, or narcolepsy, one of those. And then she would wake up and it would be like, okay, I don't know, she's just right where she left off. She doesn't know anything in between, really. And except for whatever she felt like God was showing her in those visions. And I think that if you read the Bible, there are many times where in the Old Testament, especially, you see God showing people different things, the prophets and other people, things by visions. So, in their dreams. And so she was very in tune to that, and accepting of it as being God that was showing her these things. And so she followed it out. But her following it out and having success, to me, only confirmed, yeah, that was God. That was him.
And it seems from what I've read and what I've seen because I've watched a couple of different movies, and I've read a couple of different books, and I've spoken to some of your relatives when I made those stops back in the 90s. But it seems that she was not only a vessel of a higher power, but a unquestioning vessel that got the message and then immediately acted upon it. Would you say that that's correct?
I would, yeah. I mean, because that's what God is looking for. He's just looking for somebody that will be obedient, that will hear his voice and follow what he's asking them to do. And she was, and the Holy Spirit is always speaking to us anyways, always, constantly. But we don't always hear. And then when we do hear, we don't always accept that, okay, I'm going to do that. No, but she did. She did. And that's how she lived out her life.
And to follow up on that, I've heard Reverend Carter, who is one of the curators at the Tubman home in Auburn, New York, and he talks about Tubman being a servant leader. So she serves God, but she's a leader, and definitely she was a leader. And I'd like to circle back to her family when she was raised. Her family was pulled apart by Edward Brodus, the young stepson who took Rit and all the children to his farm in Bucktown, leaving Ben Ross, their father, back at another plantation about 10 miles away. But Ben and Rit struggled and did everything they could to keep that family together. And they managed to, at least in Tubman's case, to be able to teach her the skills that she needed to survive. And the community that they lived in, too, also played a role in helping raise Tubman and her siblings. And they acquired amazing skills. And so to stick to Tubman, she may not have been able to read or write letters, but boy, she could read that landscape. She could read the night sky, the day sky, the water. She could read the seasons. I mean, she was brilliant. She could read people. So her literacy was very different. And where did she get that from? Her parents, the community. So her parents deserve a lot of credit in extraordinarily difficult circumstances to help raise this girl into a woman who had incredible abilities. And they recognize that, there's no question about it. And so in the movie, I love the way they portray Ben He was a very important figure in Tubman's life. He did earn his or get his freedom. He was set free in 1840. And so he was a very well-respected man. He had tremendous skills himself. He was an Underground Railroad agent, which a lot of people don't know. So here's an extraordinary man, and I think in the film they show that. And he did what he could to protect his family. He couldn't always do that. And I'm reminded that in testimony that Tubman gave to Sidney Howard Gay, who was an Underground Railroad agent in New York City, she told him that her father was free, but he would not leave Maryland until all of his children were free. You know, that's that sense of family. Tina has that. She grew up with that. All of the Ross and Stewart descendants have that about them. And so that's, you know, that family, it was everything to Tubman. That's why she went back and rescued people. They were her family. They were the people she loved. They were people that may not have been blood kin, but she loved them. So this is a part of her in her being raised, that these are the gifts that her family and her community gave her.
You know, that's another thing to, you know, to add to what you're saying is that two things. In the movie, it talks about, we were talking about community and how she learned about different things. In the movie, it talks about the Black watermen. But they bring the Black watermen they bring them in later. Whereas she learned that early because, you know, being on the water, working with her dad and everything, she would meet them during that time. So she met them actually before what they show in the movie. And so they were very instrumental in bringing to her information about the outside of where she was and things like that. And the other thing is that you talk about family, Kate, and how important it was. And that's very true because Aunt Harriet was the hub. And in Auburn, I mean, Auburn is a small town. But in Auburn, where my grandmother lived, and I may have had maybe about 4 or 5 relatives on that same street. It was Chapman Avenue. So Chapman Avenue is perpendicular to South Street, where Aunt Harriet's home was. And so when anybody left her house, because mostly everybody stayed there at some point in time, they didn't go far. Yeah. You know, they didn't go far from her. They might have gone down the street, around the block, or something like that. But that's where everybody stayed, right around her.
Yeah.
And when you talk about that family connection, the leave no one behind, leave no loved one behind, leave no family member behind. Tina, what lesson can we get from just that small gesture, which is actually a very large gesture? What can we get to apply to what's going on today? Because we're in a new abolitionist movement that's going on right now. And we need to take some of these lessons that Harriet Tubman put forth in her actions. How can we apply that right now as far as that family connection that you talk about? Because I love that, and I want to see more of that.
Well, I mean, it's a lesson that was taught to, I think that we all had as African Americans at some point in our lives, especially if you go back. We really, all we had was each other. And so, I mean, you heard that term, it takes a village. I mean, that was true. The African American family, you know, was a village. Oftentimes when we would go to my grandmother's house from, let's say, Buffalo, New York to Auburn, my father would always go what he called the scenic route. He didn't get on the thruway and go. He would take, you know, Route 5 and go that way, the back way. So we went a lot. We snaked around the Finger Lakes, which was a beautiful body of water, you know, and near there. But every time, you know, we would get close to Canandaigua, there were always Black migrants that were living there, you know, that would come up and they, you know, worked on the farms and things like that. And so when they would see us passing and then we would see them, they would like come out to the road and wave, hey, and we would wave. It's just like, okay, we know them, you know, but we didn't know them. They didn't know us, but we knew them because they were African Americans and they knew us because we were African Americans. So it was kindred. So in that way, you know, we were all one big family. And that's how Aunt Harriet always treated it. From the time she liberated was, you know, she had so much love for not just her family, but for other African Americans that were enslaved or that she liberated, or even afterwards that didn't have any family. You know, she wanted to create a family for them and to allow them to have dignity and to be taken care of in the way that she felt was important. So, you know, she always gave out that love. And I think that's what's important right now. We're missing that. Mm-hmm. We're missing that right from the top of the White House, is love and showing that love towards other people who don't have much, other people who are different from you, and you know, and things like that. So I think that's the important thing that we need to know now, is how do we show love? How do we uplift one another? How do we keep moving forward and you know, creating this atmosphere and this life that will embrace everybody, not just who we know or who looks like us or things like that, but everybody. Because if we are mistreated or oppressed, people don't understand. You may not be African American, you may be another culture or whatever, but if we're being oppressed, eventually it's going to affect you in a negative way as well. So it's important that, you know, that, as my son always says, love is the message.
Love is definitely the message. And also, as you mentioned, Kate, the importance of literacy that extends beyond the written word. Literacy, being literate of nature, being literate of your surroundings, being literate of relationships between different people, and being able to read situations, being able to read stories. I get a lot of this from my own wife, Clarice, about the importance of being empathetic in having a literacy and empathy. And one thing that I appreciate about the story of Harriet Tubman is how, again, she wasn't a preacher in words, but she was definitely an exceptional spiritual leader in her actions, and she led by doing. What are we missing right now from being able to translate that? Because I feel, being a fellow historian, Kate, that we should be able to go and read about different people in history, and then be able to extract what we learn and apply it to today. So what are we missing in the translation?
I think the United States, because of our history of racism, has really done a poor job of educating the country about these great leaders. They weren't all just George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Paul Revere. But in the past 50 years, more historians have explored different people and are getting, those names and those stories out. It's just not reaching the public as much as it should. And that's a tragedy, because if people could see and understood the real story of Harriet Tubman and how she was able to do the things that she did, then people may not feel that they're reinventing the wheel every time they get up to try to fight for something. That they have someone that's done it before, that sort of has their back, and that they can do it. They can. With the resources that we have today, we can do it. They can do it. Anybody can do it. It's just that we need to convey those stories of people in the past that have gone down this path. And I just, when I get back to Harriet Tubman, there's something about her brilliance. She certainly had a brilliant mind. She had incredible courage, but she also was fortified by her faith and her family. And I don't mean to say that everybody has to have faith and everybody has to have family. It can be in different forms, but there are things that fortify each and every one of us to be able to move forward and do what we need to do for our communities and elevate everyone. And we can be like Harriet Tubman. She's not that complicated. We can be like her. And I know if she were here, she'd be saying to all of us, like she said to those abolitionists, you know, you're all talking a good game, get out there and do more. And I think a lot of us would be out there with her. And there are Harriet Tubmans in our communities right now. Let's go out and find them and support them.
But when you talk about educating, also another aspect of that is when we have those stories in the books or being told, it needs to be done accurately. We don't need to rewrite history. It needs or whitewash it. It needs to be told as it was, and that's what didn't happen before.
Right.
You know, it was always told from a different point of view, not our point of view, not what really happened, but, you know, some whitewashed version of it. So, you know, that kind of thing needs to be done as well.
I would like to add on to that. Harriet was in Boston. She was in New York. She was in Virginia. She was friends with Frederick Douglass, John Brown, multiple abolitionists. And she had an impact on every last one of them. She also had the foresight not to go to Harper's Ferry when John Brown invited her to Harper's Ferry.
Yeah.
She knew better. She had the foresight not to go there. But she was in South Carolina. There's a monument of her in South Carolina. This woman was every place, and she made an impact everywhere she went. Family was absolute, but she also taught others to be a servant as well, not only to family, but to the community, to take care of each other. Like when Miss Stewart bought her the first property or gave her money, a lot of times she gave things away to other people.
She always did.
She was always giving, whatever was given to her, she was always giving away to taking care of others. She was constantly, but you know, when you give, it's gonna come back to you.
Mm-hmm.
It goes out in a university, it comes back to you. And she was constantly giving, and good was constantly going back to her because she was always taking care of the community across the country.
Yeah.
Robin, you bring up a really good point that even emphasizes even more about the awesomeness of Harriet Tubman. When you talk about her connections to others that were in the same line of work, there was no competition, there was always camaraderie. I've heard a story, and I don't know the exact specifics, so maybe you can help me out on this, any of you. You mentioned John Brown, Robin. There was some type of incident that happened, and I'm not talking about Harper's Ferry. There was another incident that happened with her and John Brown. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with that. Kate, are you familiar with that?
So he had heard so much about Harriet Tubman from Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison and a lot of different abolitionists. And so she seemed important that he needed to meet her. So he went to St. Catharines in Ontario, Canada, and met her in her home. And When he met her, the two of them took an instant liking to each other. She actually had never heard a white man say the things that he said, that he was willing to die for her. He was willing to die to end slavery. Now, she knew a lot of white abolitionist men, but they didn't come out and say, I'm going to die for you. And he did. And he spoke in this very fiery, dramatic, these biblical terms, and that God was going to come down with his sword and slice and kill all the slaveholders. She loved that. I'm going to be honest, she loved it. And so she thought he was the greatest white man that ever lived. And he called her General Tubman, which was pretty incredible that this white man would call this formerly enslaved, not lettered African-American woman who was 5 feet tall, and he called her General Tubman. That's incredible for 1858.
Yes.
So the two of them just hit it off, and she recruited men for his army that he was going to take and attack Harper's Ferry. Some of them were people, actually one of them was Tina's great grandfather, Thomas Eliot.
Yeah.
And thank goodness Thomas Eliot decided not to join John Brown and stayed in Canada instead, or Tina might not be here today. But she loved John Brown and thought he was a great man, and he did fight, and he did die for her and many others. And it's interesting, John Brown is another character that I think more people need to know about and respect and honor. And I know in the African American community, people make pilgrimages to his gravesite in North Elba, New York, and he is revered. But I think many white people think he was just crazy. He was not crazy. He was a man on a mission to end slavery, and he died for it.
He was what they call today a white ally.
Yeah, in a big way, yeah.
In actions instead of just words.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have 2 comments. Both of these comments are from Tina Bodiak. First of all, one is to Kate, and it looks like one is to Tina. Oops, there's 3 comments by her. Thank you, Tina, for this fascinating story about Harriet, your aunt. She was an exceptionally remarkable woman and obedient servant of God. And then she says, Kate, thank you for sharing Harriet's intuitive literacy. Her love for blood, family, and the brotherhood of others was crucial to her mission on the Underground Railroad. And then there's even a message to you, Robin. History books, when taught in Little Rock schools, was very much sanitized and very limited to recording Black history. This was 20 years ago. I'm not sure what has progressed. And then she says, Robin, the kind of compassion you spoke of does radiate out of others. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, here's some more comments. Janelle is asking a question. How did Harriet get the men, particularly the white men, to help her out and provide places of respite and for the runaway slaves along the way?
Well, some of those white people were Underground Railroad agents and station masters already, so she was one other person that that came through their homes. But there was something, you know, I wish I could meet her, because there was something about her personality that captivated everyone she met. So they became even more of an ally to her, and they would help her in ways that they may not have helped other people, because she asked for it and she demanded it. And so they stood behind her and beside her and provided what she needed or what she asked for. So, and in these letters of some of the abolitionists in the North, the way they talk about her, they just are so impressed with her courage and her brilliance. And part of that is their racist assumptions that she wouldn't be smart and she wouldn't be courageous. But part of it is there was something about Harriet, that's just the way it is, that compelled them to want to do more and provide more and find ways to make it possible that not that she could rescue more people, but that they could do more to end slavery.
Kate, how big was Harriet?
She was 5 feet tall.
5 feet
right?
tall.
Exactly.
5 feet tall.
Wow.
Okay. So you got this 5 feet woman going back and forth saving people, that going on these dangerous trails, on these routes, and there's no fear in her. So how would that impress people? There's no fear in her in taking those journeys.
Yeah, so another Tubman relative, Tina knows her, Judy Bryant, who is the great-great-granddaughter of William Henry Ross Stewart. She said to me, no, Tubman was filled with fear, but she used that fear to protect her and to make sure that she didn't make a mistake. And I thought that was an interesting way to look at it, that she didn't make rash decisions. She trusted her instincts. She trusted what God told her, and she was afraid, but she moved forward. She didn't let it stop her. And I think that's key, because we all have fears in our lives that stop us from doing things. And maybe that's another thing that Tubman can teach us, is that just use that fear to help move you forward in a very thoughtful way.
So basically she moved on faith. Everything was on faith and believing in herself, believing in
herself.
the Creator, but everything was on faith.
Yeah.
Janelle asked.
Talk about. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Tina. I have a question that Janelle wants to ask, but you go ahead, Tina.
Yeah, you can't talk about her without talking about her faith, because what she had was a very personal, intimate relationship with God. And that's different in how people generally have relationships. You might know somebody a little bit here, there, whatever, but really just spending time. And she talked about that in her book, where she said that she talked to God all the time. No matter what she was doing, she was talking to God. If she was washing clothes or if she was cooking, whatever, she was talking to God. And so she's talking to him. Of course, he's going to talk to her. He's going to tell her things and show her things, because she's showing, I'm interested. So I'm interested in you too. So, but, she just listened. She just listened. And I'm a firm believer, because I am, and I know that there are people that believe many different things, have different faiths and things like that. But we're talking about her and Christian faith, and what it was that she believed, the same as I believe, is that, when you walk by faith, you don't walk by sight. And that's what she did, because if she walked by sight, she wouldn't have done many things. She wouldn't have felt, because there goes to the time when she had, when she said that she had the bullet, not the bullet, but she was having the seizures and the headaches. And what did she do? She bit on a bullet. That's what she said. She bit on a bullet. And while they did the surgery, and she didn't have any anesthesia. And I'm saying, what? Wow. Really? Yeah. You didn't have anesthesia? I couldn't believe it myself, but I said, okay. I mean, this woman has such great faith. I mean, it didn't waver. That's the point. It did not waver. She did not waver in her faith. She did not doubt.
Right. And speaking of her faith and her Christian faith, but I'd also like to mention that she came from a community that still also had vestiges of African cultural and spiritual traditions. Her grandmother Modesty came from Africa. She's the only one we can formally identify as coming from Africa. So we know those were elements of her spiritual being as well. Tubman didn't have to have a church or a minister to commune with God. It was very personal, as Tina said, very, very personal for Tubman. She she was very clear on that. She didn't need someone to mediate for her. So I think that can apply for anybody who, and of any faith, that you find your faith in yourself and your spiritual being in that place.
Indeed. The question that Janelle asked is, did she really own a gun? I am totally amazed from a male versus female dynamic.
She did. She owned a gun. She owned a couple.
And she used those guns how?
So the pistol that she carried on the Underground Railroad was, people always talk about, she used it to threaten freedom seekers that were fleeing with her, that if they wanted to turn back, she'd turn the gun on them. Apparently she did do that in one instance, but she carried that pistol to protect them from slave catchers. And, you know, she needed that because slave catchers were everywhere and there were people willing to betray her everywhere. So the gun was for that purpose. And she carried a rifle during the Civil War. She was a soldier and a spy during the Civil War, and she had a remarkable sharpshooter's rifle that I have no doubt that she put to good use.
And since you brought up the Civil War, let's go ahead and go there, because not only was she a soldier and a spy, she was also, wasn't she also, Tina, a nurse in the Army as well?
Yes, she was, and she was an herbalist. I mean, she was an entrepreneur. She was well ahead of her time. She could do everything. I mean, that woman could just do everything, you know. But the thing is that, you know, when she went, you know, everybody keeps saying about her going down there that, you know, she just went down to volunteer. No, she didn't. You know, she knew that what was going on and that things were what needed to be done, which was free the slaves. But, you know, she went down because she was in essence commissioned by John Andrews, the Governor John Andrews in Boston, in Massachusetts, because he knew of her reputation. So she goes down there and he tells her, and he has it in his papers where he writes, he said, he wanted her to go and be a spy and a scout. But see, for some reason, I'm going to say that it's sexist, probably. Whenever it was talked about her, it was always, oh, she was a nurse and a cook and a laundress. And then maybe the spy and the scout thing was added. But no, you know, and that's what I try to do right now through what I'm doing. I'm trying to kind of like, okay, let's change this story. She went down there because she was asked to go to be a spy and a scout. Who else could hide in plain sight like she could?
Right.
Who else could actually just disguise herself the way she did and be, you know, so that she just blended in with everything, not have people take notice. And she was so, I mean, she was so strategic. There's a person, you know, recently I learned about this last year about the Ethiopian battle with, I think, Italy. And the woman that was the head of it, I forgot her name now, but her story lines up with Aunt Harriet so much in terms of she was really the one in front. She was the strategic planner. She knew how to bring all of these things together, and she knew how to analyze what she found out, what they brought back to her. So she was very analytical. She was, I mean, she was, you know, and I don't want to give kids the wrong idea that you don't need education, because education was denied her. But, you know, she was intelligent. She was smart. I mean, she was just like Kate, she was a genius, you know, so, you know, but again, I'm going to say, you know, she was given all these talents and leadership abilities and qualities, and she got those as gifts from God,
Yeah.
Which anybody can have if they want. Anybody can have it.
Yes. You mentioned about her disguises. One thing that I remember when I did my track from Maryland up to Canada, following her footsteps, at one of the stops, I think it was the Albany stop, and the interpreter there was telling us about her being a master of disguise, and how they told us the story about how she used to carry a chicken with her.
Yeah.
And what she would do is she would carry the chicken, and then when she saw someone coming, she would drop the chicken and then start chasing it around so that they would just ignore her.
Right. Right.
Knew how to do all that kind of stuff. She knew exactly.
She did. And, you know, she observed white people when she was enslaved. She observed them every day. She had to protect herself. So she knew if she had those chickens and she saw one of her former enslavers or masters coming down the street, then she could throw that chicken out there and they'd look at the chicken and nod at her. So, you know, she just used all those tools in her toolkit to protect herself. And she was a master at it. She really was. And in the Civil War, she had 8 men working for her. And that's documented. These 8 African-American guys were working for Tubman. And she brought the intelligence to the Union officers. So she was pretty remarkable. But as Tina said, it was because of sexism that she was not recognized formally by the Army. And she should have been, and hopefully, Tina, she will be recognized formally.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, last in June of last year, I was able to go down. She was given honorary membership into the Military Intelligence Hall of Fame.
Whoa.
Honorary now.
Whoa.
Not full membership, but honorary.
Well, that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, but you know, she should have full membership.
Yes, she should.
And so, you know, there's chance for me to add some more things to it from my point of view as a family member that might be able to change that. But they all said the same thing. They all said that it's going to happen. It's going to happen at some point where she's going to get full membership.
One thing in preparing for this event, I read an interview that you did, Tina, I think with the BBC. And it was an interview dealing with the $20 bill. And they asked you about Harriet's being, and this was before Trump came into the office, I believe. And they asked you about what you thought about her being on the $20 bill that was coming out during the Obama administration. And your response was, basically, freak the $20 bill, give her her pension that you owe her. Tell us about that.
Well, you know, I wanted her to have the recognition and everything that she deserves. You know, just like I said, the full membership, being able to pay her for what she was able to do, because they didn't give her a pension for her own service as a spy and a scout. And they didn't even give her one in the beginning for her contributions as a nurse. They gave it to her as a spouse, a survival spouse pension, because her second husband, who was 20 years younger than she was, he had served in the United States Colored Troops. And so she was able to get his pension. And then after she petitioned for her pension and was turned down, it then went back again, and then they decided, well, okay, we'll give you something more in addition to that as a nurse. And because they didn't want it, they felt like if we give her what she's asking for, well, you know, white nurses don't get $25 a month. You know, so what they did was added the two together to give her, so she ended up getting $20.
Well, she's
But
owed that pension. She's owed it, and we need to go get it, because that I hear the word reparations in my head.
Yeah.
And she needs to get that in 2020. You know, let's convert it from the $25 a month in that time, and let's bring it to this time, and let's get our pension. So you let me know what we need to do to support the pension, the Military Intelligence Hall of Fame. What else we need?
$20. Now I'm going to say that $20 bill. She needs to be on that. Now I know there are some people like my granddaughter. One of her teachers or something said to her, you know, that she wasn't in favor of her being on the 20. And the reason why she wasn't in favor of it, because that was the medium that was used to sell and to buy and sell. And that they thought it was inappropriate. And I told my granddaughter, I said, well, that's her opinion and she's entitled to it. I said, but in this family, she needs to be on the 20 like they said they were going to do. I mean, she was voted in for it. The plates were made. It was ready to go. She needs to be on the 20. So I'm hoping that when Biden comes into office, it won't be 2028 before we get her on the 20. It'll be 2022, hopefully, by the bicentennial of her birth.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah. So everybody needs to write in for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're seeing notes on both Facebook and here in Zoom. Everybody's saying what petitions need to be signed to get this taken care of. So.
Yeah, you can start one in your neighborhood. Send it to your congressperson.
Yeah.
Your senator.
Here's a question asking, are there any statues of her anywhere?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I think there are 10 or 11 around the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, I was just told by the, and this is what you were asking Kate about, the Centennial Commission for the suffrage. They are going to be in Seneca Falls, I think it's September 2nd. And they're going to unveil the plans for a statue that she's a part of. So they'll have that right by the National Women's Museum, which is talks about all the suffrage movement and everything, all the women that were an important part of that.
Thank you. Well, you know, Trump just recently, I guess, pardoned Susan B. Anthony, and there is a story about Susan B. Anthony and Harriet Tubman being cohorts. Can you talk about that, Kate?
First of all, I don't think Trump can pardon her because it was a state crime. I don't think it was a federal crime, but that's beside the point. And Susan B. Anthony was very proud of being arrested for trying to vote in 1872. Harriet Tubman and Susan B. Anthony were lifelong friends from the late 1850s. And actually, Harriet Tubman brought some of her refugees through Susan B. Anthony's home in Rochester, New York in 1860 or 61. So they had a long relationship. She was interviewed at one point and asked about her feelings about women's suffrage. And she said that she followed Susan B. Anthony in her beliefs about suffrage. And she went to suffrage meetings with Susan B. Anthony, and Anthony wrote about her. And I know that the white women in the suffrage movement were sometimes quite racist. And, but at least in the instance of Susan B. Anthony and Harriet Tubman, they had a close relationship and they valued and loved each other as colleagues and as friends.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned that some of the white women suffragists, if I can pronounce the word correctly, what were racist. So it was news to me to learn that Harriet Tubman was even equated with that movement. And what do we need to do to accurately write that story so that Harriet Tubman is in that story, in the position that she deserves to be in?
Well, are you gonna go? Go ahead, Kate.
No, go ahead.
Well, you know, in terms of the suffrage movement and African American women, you know, we wanted that, but we had more at stake because and even with Aunt Harriet, a lot of her time was spent on dealing with and helping the freedmen and getting them situated, the refugees and things like that, and still focusing a lot on that. And then in her later years, I mean, especially when things really started getting heated up, I mean, she was getting older, but like Kay said, she still had that relationship with Susan B. Anthony. But when all that was going on, you had those women, predominantly, a lot of them were also abolitionists. But when it came to the point of the different amendments coming in and being passed, and what they felt they needed, and they had to, like Trump does, pander. They had to pander to the white Southern women that they wanted to bring in to make perhaps to up the ante so that they could get that vote. And so in doing so, they had to in so many words, disenfranchise the African American women who were right along there with him, which often happens to us. But the thing is that we didn't stop. You know, we continued to support the vote. We continued to, you know, the marches and the rallies and things like that, and continued to speak out in hopes of winning that vote. You know, and then in the end, you'll see where Ida B. Wells, there was a formation of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs. That came out of that. That came out of that disenfranchisement. You know, not just that, but, you know, dealing with the lynchings and things like that. But they formed these clubs to be able to be heard and to be able to support the things that they felt were high on their list of being important. And so when they did this in this one meeting, and you can go on Library of Congress, their website, and they have the minutes there. And it talks about, and the first time I read, I just cried, and because it talked about Aunt Harriet being the oldest member, and then Ida B. Wells and her child and her infant son being the youngest. And she, just like when John Kennedy talks about passing the torch, well, that's what they said about Aunt Harriet. She passed the torch.
Wow.
To her son, to her and her son. And I just thought that was so,
wow.
Yeah.
Just so heartfelt, so wonderful.
Those women, the National Association of Colored Women, when they formed their suffrage organization, Tubman was like the featured star of the founding meeting in 1896 in Washington, D.C. The respect that was accorded her, because they called her Mother Tubman, and she was on stage, and she encouraged them and inspired them to keep fighting for this, because she'd been through a whole lot, and she knew that they could do it and carry it to the goal line. And the stories that she would tell them, and on her deathbed, she was dying, and some of the women from the organization, the Black Women's Suffrage Organization, came to visit her, and she encouraged them to stick together. The women should stick together. Don't let the Black women and white women fight each other. They've got to stick together. And when somebody asked her, do you really believe that women should have the right to vote? She said, I suffered enough for it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the National Association for Colored Women, they were instrumental in getting the NAACP to begin its anti-lynching campaign.
Yeah.
So,
And Ida B. Wells was the headliner.
Yes. So this is an amazing story. We need a part 2 and a part 3 of the movie, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, you know what? The way they did that movie, that was the great thing about that movie, is that they did it in such a way where you could have many, many sequels to tell her story.
Yeah.
You can just keep going and keep going.
Yeah.
Well, let's tell her story about what's going on right now here in the United States, possibly the world, in 2020. We have a situation where there's a new abolitionist movement going on. There's protests going on in the streets, and there is a need for Harriet Tubman right now, and for people who are embodying the spirit of Harriet Tubman. Can you guys speak to that?
Well, you know, with Aunt Harriet, when you look at what she did, you know, she did not do it all by herself.
Mhm.
You know, she embraced people. You know, when you come to me, if you come to me with the right attitude and you want to help, then I accept it. I'm going to embrace you, and we're going to do this together. And that's what she did. And I think that is the one thing that was so great, is that although when you go back and you look at the different movements, even during the time of the civil rights and the marches and everything, you saw some white folks there, but not like you did this time. I mean, this time it was like, I mean, masses and masses and masses of people of other cultures. And because I'm not going to say of different races, you know, as we're talking about and learning, of different color pigment, because the Bible says we are one race. We're made from one blood, and we're human race. That's what it is. But we just have different pigments. It's man who has put all this racial stuff out there,
Mm-hmm.
and changed and said, okay, well, you're this color, so you're not as good, or you're that color, you're better, and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, and we're just one race with different pigments and different cultures. And those cultures need to be embraced, about, you know, of who we are and what we can learn from each other and what we can share about one another and celebrate about one another. And that's what's important. But now I went off on a tangent. I forgot what you asked me.
You're fine. You're fine.
But
Well, I think that Tubman's legacy is more important today than it ever has been. And I think that, first of all, I think that she would be, so energized by what's happening today. Things are changing. Things are changing. And she would be out there protesting.
Yep.
She'd be hitting people up for support.
Yep.
And she'd be demanding that people get out there and not just talk, but do the walk too. And I really think if we just look to her and look at her, that she can be our inspiration, because all of her values, her morals, her values were all in the right place. And these are things that we all think that we have, and we need to show that we are willing to stand up for freedom and equality and justice, self-determination, family, faith, our communities. Just we're one big community, and our communities together can make this happen. And she would want us to help refugees and get those kids out of those cages. I mean, she would be down there chaining herself to one of those fences right now. The time is now, and Tubman can be our beacon like she was before.
And you know,
in her lifetime.
the thing is that you use whatever talents you have,
Mhm.
because all of us, you know, can't get out there and march.
Right.
And do all those things, but that doesn't mean that we can't be supportive. We can't protest in the way that we can from where we are, or whatever way that we can do it. And you see what that people are doing that now. I mean, people who dance, who play music, artists, people who just speak well, and all those different things. You know, they just use whatever they have to show their support. And like what you said, Kate, about asking for things, she was good about that. She would be bold about that, just saying, this is what I need. I need some money from you. I need this, or I need that. And she would get it.
Yeah.
I'd like to add on, I'd like to make a comment. While this journey has been going on with with Tubman and along the Civil War, and we're going into Reconstruction. All the while, one fight has been going on, another battle has been going on also with the systemic institution that has been raised up against us, that has been raised to keep us in place, to keep us oppressed. We didn't build it. And so, and dismantling it is going to be a challenge, but it would take more than us to dismantle it. When we talk about fighting the fight, this involves everyone. And all of us bring different skill sets. All of us have different skill sets to bring to this fight. And with that, we have to know our power. We have to know who we are and believe in who we are. And when we come out onto the battlefield, and most importantly, we have to look at, humanity. And right now, there's an absence of that, of humanity. But then looking at what are the consequences of humanity? What are the consequences of us supporting each other and uplifting each other? What are the consequences of us celebrating each other's differences? And that's what moves me. That is what I feel, that how I can feel good about myself and knowing who I am and knowing that what I'm up against, we have a long way to go because we are not looking to each other. And so once we start doing that and supporting each other, fighting for each other and believing in each other, I think that would help to dissolve some of this. But it all boils down to humanity.
Well, you don't, you talked about systemic racism. And with systemic racism, it takes cooperation from the communities.
Definitely.
That's how it becomes systemic. And the thing is that we've tried to do certain things before, and we've achieved certain things before, but it always gets dismantled. It always gets circumvented in some kind of way. And the thing is that now we need to rip out the core of racism. And in order to rip that core out, you got to be educated. You got to find out what it is, where it came from, why it was there. Because see, when you go back and you look at history, you go back to the beginning of when we were brought over into this country. When we got here, of course, you had the slavery. And then you had what they call slavery codes. Then, and that's where that gathering together of community to protect what it is that they wanted. And which is when you start looking at all the different things that were done to circumvent and to keep us in place, it was all based upon money, the love of money. And so you had the slavery. Slavery was abolished. Then you developed black codes. That was another way of keeping us enslaved in another way without actual legal slavery. But it was done to keep us in a certain place, a certain type of labor. And if we didn't do it, then we were jailed. And anybody else, and how they did it was such, you want to go against our community and help these people, then we're gonna hurt you too. We're gonna get you too. So you had that. Then once that was done, you couldn't do that anymore, Jim Crow came in. Jim Crow did the legal segregation, stopping us from voting, stopping us from working. And what African Americans, I feel like, really need to understand right now is so important is that not only was education kept from us because they knew education was power, but also the vote was kept from us. And that's what continues to today. They trying to keep that vote from us in any way they can, because when we vote in power, you look at what happened with Obama, how we all just came out in mass. Same thing needs to happen right now. Same thing needs to happen right now.
Yep.
We need to get the chaos and the corruption out of the White House.
And the inhumanity out.
Yes, yes, yes. And the only way to do that is to come out and vote. And he's trying to stop that vote by what he's doing with the mail, the post office. I mean, we all know, but I don't understand how the Republican Party is just going along with all of this. Because had it been anybody else, would have been out a long time ago.
Right.
But we have to come in and vote and not allow anybody to distract us. You know, Kanye West, which I think is really a plant, you know, to kind of distract. And we have people really saying, oh, I'm going to vote for him. I'm going to vote for him. But if you vote for him, you're giving your vote away to Trump. If you don't come out and vote at all, you're giving your vote away to Trump. And I know that there are many things that need to be done, and people want a revolution. They want things to change. But I say first, let's get that out of the White House. Then you can work on changing things around like they should be, hopefully. And with somebody who will listen. You know, so I'm just putting out there, everybody, just please tell everybody, tell all your friends, your family, everything, vote.
Indeed. And there was a similar election of consequence around during the Civil War / Reconstruction era that had about the same significance. Yeah. And we just we want to make sure that what happened then does not replicate itself. Am I right, Kate?
Yeah. And we all need to vote for Harriet because she could not vote. She died before women got the right to vote.
Right.
So let's think of her and vote for her and vote early.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not only vote for her, we need to get our rescue missions on as well, because there's a lot of us that are mentally enslaved that need to be saved. And so we need to go in with our guns saying, let's go. I'm your protection. I'm your Moses. Let's do this. Sister Robin, do you have anything that you want to add? Because it looks like we're about out of time. We got 5 minutes left in this.
Do you have any more questions?
I don't have any more questions on, let me see, do any of the viewers on Facebook or on Zoom, do you guys have any more questions? I see here's a comment here that's saying that there is a petition on change.org as far as the Harriet Tubman being on the $20 bill is concerned. It has over 8,000 signatures. 18,000, excuse me, I said 8,000. 18,000 signatures. So that's that.
I have to go look that up, change.org.
Yes, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, well, I'd like to say this, that we all have a calling. I think every one of us have a calling, even if we haven't discovered it yet. And we all have the potential to be servants, to serve our family, to serve our community. We all have that potential. But we have to look into ourselves to see what role we're going to take and step into that role. It's time for all of us to step into that role that we've been called for. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Well, and with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and we could start with Kate. If you can give us some closing comments, then we go to Tina, and then Robin, you can finish it up with the closing comments since the Park Service and the Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site was the original sponsor of this event. Go ahead, Kate.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been great. And I'm thrilled that Tubman continues to inspire so many people, and I hope you all go see the film. It isn't all accurate, but it's a fabulous movie, and it has the essence of Tubman, and that's what comes blaring off the screen. And I also would like to say that for everybody that's out there today watching this, as a white woman, I have to every single day remind myself to fight racism, because it's white people that are doing the racism and acting that way. And I need to be a great ally, and I need to fight it. I need to look inside myself every single day and ask myself, what am I doing and how can I do it better? And so this is the time. It's okay to call each other out and find ways to dismantle institutional racism, so that we can build a better and greater world.
Tina?
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody again. And I have fun, as you can see. I love talking about Aunt Harriet. I get really excited and passionate about her. I love her. I love her. And but the thing is that, you know, in part of what I said about the voting, that was my takeaway. I mean, that's what I really wanted to just drive home for people to do, especially our people. And the thing is about when we talk about, you were talking about, Kate, the fight for having to look at your attitudes and things like that. And when I was talking about the white people and other people of other cultures coming together to support, that's the thing. See, while we're protesting, you're out there doing the protesting and everything, and that's great. But the thing is, once that's done, go home and talk to your families, talk to your neighbors, your community, you know, where you habitate and where you socialize, those things. And when you hear people say things that are not right, make jokes or make statements or whatever, don't be afraid to step up and correct it and tell them, oh no, that's not, I don't find that's funny. I don't think that that's good. I don't think that that's true. You know, step up your game to that point and say that. But you know, I would say that, just like Kay said before, you want to be Harriet Tubman, you want to do the things that Harriet Tubman did, you know, it is just take yourself out of the center, because she took herself out. Put somebody else in the center. Because even when after she went back to Auburn, she had the John Brown Infirmary for the aged and infirm, to take care of people who were sick and they were old, you know. And so, you know, think about that. Think about the people in your own community that are in nursing homes, that are being mistreated, that don't have anyone, that are forgotten and isolated. Look at them as well. Take a little time, go say hi, take something to them that's nice. Let them know that they're not forgotten.
Thank you. And my co-moderator, Robin, go ahead and put some icing on this cake.
Right. Well, Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site commemorates the story of the Little Rock Nine African-American students that desegregated Central High School, or white Central High School. Now, these were students, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. And think about this. They had the courage to set their fear aside, to stand in something that they believed in. They stood in their convictions. And it's incumbent upon us to do the same, to stand in our convictions and do what's right. We all have Harriet Tubman in us. And we have a responsibility to each other. And so with that, I would like for us to take on that responsibility. Look at your skill sets and what you can do to contribute to the greater good of all. And I appreciate that, because we have a long road to go, Thank you.
Good night, and we'll be back here next week with another fine episode of the Descendants Talk Mini Festival. You guys have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday. Good night.